Paradise and damnation exist mere kilometers apart, yet the gap between them cannot be bridged in 100 lifetimes. Welcome to Stara, a hive world where 17 billion human souls struggle for breath beneath an eternal blanket of industrial pollution. Dawn arrives here in a peculiar way. Enormous orbital reflectors, maintained by servitor units that have performed this single task for 300 years, capture the dying sun's rays and redirect them earthward. Their polished surfaces gleam with mechanical perfection. In the towering noble quarters that pierce the smog ceiling, this reflected illumination bathes everything in warm amber tones. These pristine marble corridors have never felt the weight of working-class footsteps. Within chambers whose square footage exceeds entire residential complexes, Lady Cassera Vera begins another day cocooned in absolute privilege, another rotation spent in willful unawareness. The oxygen entering her respiratory system has undergone 17 separate purification stages. Her bathing water originates from glacial reserves on a distant moon, transported across 2 star systems at expenses capable of sustaining 1,000 households annually. Artisans who sacrificed their eyesight weaving its delicate patterns created the silk garments touching her skin. Their personal tragedies are measured only in fabric quality and tactile sensation, never in human suffering. Each morning, Cassera awakens within a reality meticulously constructed to conceal the genuine cost of her lifestyle. At 23 standard years, she represents the next generation of House Vera's leadership, among 7 founding dynasties governing Stara since the era of the Great Crusade. Her genealogical records span 12 millennia, with successive generations accumulating ever greater fortunes and increasingly profound disconnection from the masses dwelling in the depths. Her personal quarters, situated 40 levels above the contamination line, contain more usable space than average citizens will encounter in their entire existence. The clothing collection in her wardrobe holds monetary value exceeding whole city sectors. Her jewelry assemblage could finance an imperial battleship. Yet she has never questioned the origins of this abundance. Which laborers extract the precious metals? What spines bend under crushing loads to harvest resources, making her comfort achievable? The daily routine unfolds with mechanical predictability. Servitors, their consciousness stripped through lobotomization procedures, fulfill her requirements with programmed precision. They clothe her in robes whose cost surpasses a laborer's lifetime income. Pins forged from exotic metals, extracted from shafts where workers perish daily in structural collapses and toxin exposure, secure her elaborate hairstyle. Cosmetics ground from minerals collected by juveniles, their diminutive fingers ideal for accessing narrow mineral veins, paint her features. Each luxurious touch bears the invisible weight of agony she cannot perceive, refuses to acknowledge, has been systematically trained never to contemplate. Morning sustenance arrives on sterling platters borne by human attendants whose vocal cords have been purchased through surgical removal of their tongues. The culinary presentation transcends all reasonable expectation. Exotic fruits cultivated on agricultural worlds where irrigation systems run with the tears of bonded laborers. Protein from livestock maintained in conditions of absolute comfort while consuming grains sufficient to prevent starvation across entire populations. Bread produced from flour so extensively refined that its creation demands the coordinated labor of thousands, their existence quantified through efficiency metrics and production targets. Lady Cassera consumes this bounty without contemplation, without appreciation, without recognizing that every morsel represents a choice by countless others to feed her rather than themselves. Her window offers breathtaking vistas. Beyond the transparistile, pale golden skies stretch infinitely, unmarred by the poisonous vapors enshrouding lower elevations. Orbital mirrors intercept Stara's fading stellar radiation and bounce it downward in gentle, warming beams that never penetrate the deeper hive sections. From her elevation, planetary curvature becomes visible, the distant sparkle of neighboring noble towers, the aesthetically pleasing architecture of upper-tier districts where her social class exists in isolated magnificence. What remains forever beyond her sight, What the fundamental design of her residential tower actively prevents her from witnessing is the foundation supporting this entire structure. Far beneath, beyond the reach of even the most powerful magnification equipment, 17 billion humans commence their own morning rituals. They rouse themselves in darkness so absolute that many have never experienced natural illumination. They inhale atmosphere laden with industrial particulates that scar pulmonary tissue before their 10th birthday. They consume corpse starch formed from recycled proteins of deceased neighbors, flavored with chemical compounds that mask the taste of decomposition. They labor through 16-hour shifts in environments that would terminate a noble's life within minutes. Their physical bodies are expendable commodities in a colossal production apparatus existing purely to sustain the luxury above. These are the hands mining the precious metals adorning Lady Kasara's jewelry. These are the backs bending to harvest materials for her garments. These are the fingers crafting the goods she utilizes without reflection. Their expertise and torment translated into comfort she has never questioned. The separation between their reality and hers transcends mere physical distance. It represents a deliberate chasm, maintained through religious doctrine, justified through a faith system that transforms exploitation into sacred duty. The Imperium teaches that social hierarchy embodies divine intention. The Emperor protects, but his protection manifests through structure, through order, through the proper assignment of each soul to its designated function. Nobility rules because the Emperor ordains it. The masses toil because the Emperor commands it. This is not brutality but cosmic equilibrium, not suppression but holy obligation. Every sermon reinforces these principles. Every prayer validates this framework. Every ceremony glorifies the wisdom of a system converting human misery into celestial order. Lady Kasara has internalized these truths throughout her existence. She embraces them with the intensity of the untested, the conviction of the unchallenged. Within her sphere, uncertainty is not merely discouraged, it is conceptually impossible. Her education included zero exposure to conditions below. Her instructors spoke exclusively of duty, honor, and appropriate governance. Her companions share her isolation, her presumptions, her flawless ignorance regarding the price of their existence. They navigate their days like performers in a theatrical production, executing roles written by others, never questioning the script, demanding their comfort necessitate the suffering of billions. The morning agenda includes standard aristocratic activities. A lesson in estate administration teaching her to calculate optimal servant-to-room ratios, never mentioning compensation or working conditions. An artistic appreciation tutorial exploring the beauty of sculptures carved by artists who succumbed to pulmonary disease from stone particles. A briefing on family financial ventures discussing profit percentages and production efficiency, never the human toll of either. Each activity reinforces her remoteness from reality. Each lesson adds another insulating layer between her awareness and the truth of her circumstances. At midday, she joins her mother, Lady Celine Vera, for the daily communication review. They occupy a chamber whose walls display communications technology worth more than most planetary governments possess, examining messages from across the sector. Trade contracts that will expand their wealth through exploiting new populations. Marriage proposals that will extend their influence by merging their fortune with others constructed on similar foundations. Investment prospects promising returns measured in currency but paid in lives. They discuss these subjects with the detached indifference of individuals selecting dinner beverages. Their dialogue flows around human consequences like water around stone. Afternoon brings social responsibilities, tea with wives and daughters of other noble houses, conversations circling endlessly around fashion, gossip, and social positioning. They discuss latest clothing trends, never mentioning manufacturing facilities where juveniles work 18-hour shifts producing the fabrics. They gossip about scandals and alliances, never acknowledging the bribes and extortions funding their lifestyles. They plan celebrations and gatherings, never considering the tithes and taxes extracted from starving populations to finance their entertainment. These women are not malevolent. They are not deliberately sadistic. They are simply products of a system engineered to shield them from the consequences of their existence. Their compassion extends to their peers, their families, their immediate circle of concern. They contribute generously to charitable causes, assisting other nobles in crisis. They pray passionately for the emperor's protection. They consider themselves virtuous people, faithful servants of humanity's divine structure. The tragedy lies not in their malice but their ignorance, not in their cruelty but their blindness, not in their hatred but their perfectly cultivated inability to perceive. Evening approaches with promises of another extravagant dinner. The culinary staff begins preparations, a choreographed dance of gastronomic artistry transforming raw ingredients into aesthetic perfection. Chefs trained in techniques transmitted through generations work with ingredients gathered from across the galaxy. Each dish represents not merely sustenance but declaration. Each course a proclamation of wealth and refinement distinguishing noble houses from lesser mortals. The preparation alone requires hundreds of laborers. Their skill and effort invested in creating a single night's entertainment for people who will consume it without contemplation. Lady Cassera withdraws to her chambers to prepare for the feast. Her servants attend to her with practiced efficiency, their movements choreographed by years of service, their silence enforced by training transforming humans into living furniture. They dress her in garments shimmering with precious metals, adorn her with jewelry catching artificial light and refracting it in rainbow patterns, arrange her appearance to project the proper image of nobility and grace. She stands before mirrors reflecting only what she wishes to see, an image of beauty and privilege revealing nothing of the cost required to maintain either. As the sun sets beyond the orbital mirrors, casting the noble spires in gentle twilight, the evening's entertainment commences. The great halls fill with soft conversational murmurs, the gentle chiming of crystal, the subdued melodies of trained performers whose talent has been purchased for the night. The atmosphere carries fragrances of exotic flowers maintained in gardens where water alone costs more than most citizens earn in a lifetime. Everything is flawless. Everything is beautiful. Everything is designed to reinforce the illusion that such perfection is natural, deserved, and sustainable. But illusions, regardless of how carefully maintained, can fracture with shocking suddenness. And on this particular evening, as Lady Cassera prepares to descend for dinner, the first fissure appears in her perfect reality. The residence trembles, not violently, not dangerously, but with the subtle vibration of some distant disturbance. A sound resembling thunder rolls upward from the hive's depths, faint but persistent, carrying suggestions of things breaking, systems failing, order disrupting. The servants pause in their duties, their augmented hearing detecting frequencies beyond human range. The house's defensive protocols activate briefly, scanning for threats that fail to materialize. Then silence returns, and the moment passes like a nightmare upon waking. Lady Cassera dismisses the disturbance with the ease of someone who has never confronted genuine danger. Maintenance complications perhaps, construction accidents in lower levels, infrastructure problems her family's engineers will resolve without her involvement or concern. She possesses no framework for understanding what that sound actually represented, no context for interpreting its significance, no reason to connect it to her own existence. The tremor might as well have occurred on another planet for all the impact it has on her evening plans. She descends to dinner, her mind already shifting to the social dynamics awaiting her. Which guests will attend, what conversations will unfold, which alliances might be strengthened or tested over the course of the meal. These are the challenges occupying her intelligence, the problems demanding her attention, the concerns defining her reality. The dining hall gleams with illumination from 1,000 candles, each flame reflected in surfaces polished to mirror brightness. The elongated table stretches beneath a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of imperial triumph, heroic imagery transforming conquest into glory, oppression into righteousness, exploitation into divine will. The assembled guests represent the finest of Stara's noble society, men and women whose bloodlines reach back through millennia, whose wealth shapes the destiny of billions, whose decisions ripple through the galaxy like stones thrown into still water. They speak in voices trained to project authority, their words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. They discuss matters of trade and governance with the casual confidence of people who have never faced the consequences of being wrong. Their conversations flow around topics of galactic importance, decisions that will affect populations they will never meet, policies that will determine the fate of worlds they will never visit. Yet for all their power, for all their influence, they remain as ignorant of reality as children playing with toys they do not understand. The first course arrives with ceremony befitting a religious ritual. Servers move with practiced precision, their steps silent on carpets woven from the finest materials in the galaxy. Each plate represents hours of preparation, each arrangement a work of art created by masters of their craft. The food itself transcends mere sustenance, transformed into aesthetic experience engaging all the senses while nourishing the body. The cost of this single course could fund the food requirements of entire city districts. But such considerations do not enter the consciousness of those who consume it. Lady Cassera takes her place at the high table with the automatic grace of someone born to privilege. Her position reflects her family's status, her seat a throne elevating her above even her noble peers. The conversation flows around her like music, familiar melodies of power and influence she has heard all her life. She participates with the practiced ease of someone playing a role they have rehearsed since childhood. Her words contribute to discussions whose consequences she cannot imagine, whose implications she has never been taught to consider. The topics range across the spectrum of noble concerns, trade agreements with off-world partners that will increase their profits while exploiting new populations, military contracts that will profit from conflicts they help to ferment, investment opportunities in mining operations that consume workers like fuel, their lives measured in production quotas rather than human worth. Each subject is discussed with the detached intellectualism of people analyzing abstract problems, their conversations divorced from the human cost of every decision they contemplate. A guest mentions recent unrest in the lower hives, disturbances that have disrupted production schedules and threatened profit margins. The conversation turns to solutions, options for restoring order and maintaining productivity. Increased surveillance, enhanced punishment, reduced rations until compliance is restored. They speak of human beings as components in a machine, problems to be solved rather than people to be considered. Their proposed solutions reveal the casual cruelty of those who have never faced the consequences of their own choices, the abstract brutality of decision-makers who will never experience the results of their decisions. Lady Cassera listens with the interest of someone following a mildly engaging academic discussion. The lower hives exist in her consciousness as economic abstractions, sources of revenue rather than homes to living people. When she hears of unrest, she thinks of disrupted schedules rather than human desperation. When solutions are proposed, she evaluates their efficiency rather than their morality. This is not cruelty but ignorance, not malice but blindness, not hatred but the perfect insulation that her education and environment have provided. The second course arrives as the first is cleared away, another masterpiece of culinary artistry transforming raw ingredients into aesthetic experience. The presentation alone represents more labor than most citizens perform in a week. The preparation requiring skills developed over lifetimes of training. Each element has been selected for its perfection, its rarity, its ability to demonstrate the wealth and refinement of those consuming it. The pleasure they derive from the meal is genuine, their appreciation real, their satisfaction honest. They are not pretending to enjoy themselves. They simply cannot see the cost of their enjoyment. The conversation shifts to matters of culture and refinement, discussion of artistic patronage, support for musicians and poets whose talent serves to glorify the nobility and justify their position. They speak of commissioning works that will celebrate their family histories, their achievements, their contributions to imperial glory. The artists they support create beauty, but beauty purchased with the suffering of those who fund it through their labor and taxation. Each painting, each sculpture, each musical composition represents a choice to spend resources on aesthetic pleasure rather than human welfare, a decision made without conscious consideration of the alternatives. A young lord speaks passionately about his latest acquisition, a sculpture carved from rare stone by an artist whose talent was legendary. He describes the piece in loving detail, its perfect proportions, its exquisite craftsmanship, its ability to capture the essence of imperial nobility in frozen stone. He does not mention that the artist died of lung disease contracted from years of exposure to stone dust, that the quarry where the material was extracted has claimed hundreds of lives, that the transportation costs alone could have fed entire communities. These details exist outside his framework of understanding, irrelevant to his appreciation of beauty. Lady Cassera contributes her own observations about aesthetic matters, her comments revealing an educated appreciation for art and culture. Her tutors have trained her well in the recognition of beauty, the evaluation of artistic merit, the proper response to creative expression. She speaks knowledgeably about technique and style, historical context, and cultural significance. Her intelligence is real, her education comprehensive, her aesthetic sense refined. Yet all of this learning exists within carefully constructed boundaries, walls of ignorance that prevent her from connecting beauty to its cost, art to its consequences, culture to the suffering required to sustain it. The meal continues through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. The progression represents a journey through the finest products of the imperial economy. Ingredients gathered from across the galaxy at costs that would bankrupt worlds. Spices from agroplanets where the soil is fertilized with the ground bones of previous generations of workers. Wines aged in vaults carved by miners who never saw daylight again. Delicacies prepared using techniques developed by chefs who died perfecting their craft. Each bite represents the culmination of countless human efforts, the transformation of suffering into pleasure that defines the noble experience. Between courses, entertainment is provided by performers whose talent has been purchased for the evening. Musicians play instruments crafted from materials worth more than entire city districts, their skill developed through training that consumed their entire lives. Dancers move with grace that speaks of years of discipline, their bodies shaped by practices that destroyed their health in service to their art. Poets recite verses that celebrate noble virtue and imperial glory, their words transforming exploitation into righteousness, oppression into divine will. The entertainment is magnificent, the artistry genuine, the performance flawless. Only the cost remains invisible. Lady Cassera watches with the appreciation of someone raised to understand and value artistic excellence. Her response is not feigned, her pleasure genuine, her recognition of talent real. She has been educated to appreciate beauty in all its forms, trained to recognize quality and refinement wherever they appear. The performers before her represent the highest levels of human achievement, their dedication to their craft worthy of respect and admiration. She sees their artistry without questioning the system that produced it, enjoys their performance without considering what their lives cost them to achieve such skill. The evening progresses with the stately rhythm of ritual, each element following its designated place in the sequence of noble entertainment. The conversation flows through topics of interest to their social class, discussions that reveal their concerns, their priorities, their understanding of the world they inhabit. They speak of matters that affect trillions of lives with the casual confidence of people who have never doubted their right to make such decisions, whose authority has never been questioned, whose wisdom has never been tested against the consequences of their choices. A senior lord discusses upcoming negotiations with off-world trading partners, deals that will expand their commercial empire while exploiting new populations. His analysis is sophisticated, his understanding of economic principles comprehensive, his strategic thinking impressive. He speaks of market forces and competitive advantages, profit margins and risk assessments, opportunity costs and strategic positioning. His expertise is genuine, his intelligence obvious, his competence unquestionable. Yet all of his knowledge exists within a framework that treats human beings as resources, populations as markets, suffering as an acceptable cost of business. The discussion reveals the machinery of exploitation that sustains noble wealth, the complex systems that transform human misery into comfortable existence. Trade agreements that give nobles exclusive access to products created by slave labor. Tax policies that extract wealth from the poorest while exempting the richest. Labor practices that treat workers as expendable components in production systems. Each element of the system has been refined over centuries, perfected through generations of experience, optimized to maximize the flow of wealth upward while minimizing the ability of those below to resist or escape. Lady Cassera participates in these conversations with growing confidence as the evening progresses. Her education has prepared her for this role. Her training provided her with the knowledge and skills necessary to take her place among the ruling class. She offers insights that reveal her intelligence, suggestions that demonstrate her understanding of complex issues, observations that show her growing grasp of the responsibilities that await her. Her contributions are welcomed, her opinions valued, her participation encouraged. She is fulfilling her destiny, growing into the role for which she was born, becoming the leader she was raised to be. Yet even as she demonstrates her competence, even as she proves her worthiness to inherit her family's position, she remains completely isolated from the reality of what that position demands. Her knowledge is comprehensive but bounded. Her intelligence sharp but focused only on approved topics. Her skills advanced but applied only within acceptable parameters. She has been raised to be an effective ruler without ever being allowed to see what she would be ruling. Trained to make decisions without understanding their consequences, educated to wield power without recognizing its costs. The final courses materialize as the evening reaches its zenith. Delicacies so exceptionally rare and prohibitively expensive that their consumption represents pure extravagance manifest. These are foods existing solely to showcase wealth, ingredients serving no purpose beyond their capacity to prove that those partaking can afford the impossible. The preparation alone demands techniques so intricate that mastering them devours entire lifetimes. Skills so hyper-specialized that those possessing them become prisoners of their own expertise. Each morsel represents the apex of human suffering transformed into fleeting pleasure, the ultimate expression of a system valuing aristocratic enjoyment above human life. The conversation reaches its own crescendo as well, the participants emboldened by wine and success to speak more candidly about their plans and ambitions. They discuss strategies for expanding their wealth, techniques for increasing their control over the population serving them, methods for ensuring the current system remains stable and profitable. Their planning is meticulous, their understanding of power dynamics sophisticated, their grasp of human psychology impressive. They speak as conquerors planning campaigns, rulers designing systems of control, gods arranging the fates of mortals. Lady Cassera finds herself swept up in the excitement of these discussions, her own contributions becoming more audacious and confident as the night progresses. She proposes refinements to taxation policies that would extract more wealth from working populations while providing them with just enough hope to prevent despair from turning to revolt. She suggests modifications to the educational system that would produce more compliant workers while identifying potential troublemakers for removal. She offers insights into psychological techniques that could be used to make exploitation feel like privilege, oppression seem like protection. Her ideas are brilliant, her suggestions sophisticated, her understanding of human nature impressive. She demonstrates the intelligence and creativity that mark her as a true heir to her family's legacy. Someone capable of not merely maintaining their position, but expanding it. The other nobles respond with approval and admiration, recognizing in her the qualities that will make her a formidable leader, a worthy successor to generations of successful rulers. She has proven herself, earned her place, demonstrated her fitness to inherit power beyond the imagination of common mortals. As the evening draws to a close, as the final toasts are raised and the last course is consumed, Lady Cassera feels a sense of completion and satisfaction that goes beyond mere social success. She has participated in something larger than herself, contributed to discussions that will shape the future of worlds, proven her worthiness to inherit a legacy that stretches back through millennia. The evening has been perfect, the company stimulating, the conversation enlightening. She retires to her chambers with the contentment of someone who has found their place in the cosmic order, someone who has discovered their purpose and embraced their destiny. Yet as she prepares for sleep in her luxurious suite, as servants attend to her needs with mechanical precision, as the sounds of celebration fade into the comfortable silence of the upper spires, she remains completely unaware that her perfect evening was funded by the suffering of billions, that her satisfaction was purchased with the despair of those she will never see, that her contentment requires the continued exploitation of populations whose existence she cannot imagine. Tomorrow will bring another day of comfort and privilege, another round of social obligations and political discussions, another opportunity to demonstrate her fitness for the role she was born to fulfill. She will wake in her perfect world, isolated from reality by barriers of wealth and ignorance, protected from truth by systems designed to shield her from the consequences of her existence. The distance between her paradise and the hell that sustains it will remain unmeasured and uncrossed. A chasm maintained by design, necessity, and the simple human capacity to see only what one wishes to see. But tomorrow, for the first time in her life, that distance will begin to collapse. The morning arrives with the same golden light, the same purified air, the same carefully orchestrated routine of luxury and comfort. Lady Cassera wakes refreshed and satisfied, her mind still glowing with the success of the previous evening, her confidence buoyed by the recognition she received from her peers. The day ahead promises more of the same pleasures and privileges, another opportunity to expand her understanding of the role she was born to play, another step toward the inheritance that awaits her. Her servants attend to her morning routine with their usual efficiency, their movements so practiced that they seem like extensions of her own will. They dress her in garments appropriate for the day's activities, arrange her appearance to project the proper image of noble grace and authority. The process feels as natural as breathing, as automatic as her heartbeat, as inevitable as the sunrise itself. She has never known any other way of beginning a day, never imagined that billions of people wake to darkness, cold, and the immediate pressure of survival. Breakfast arrives with its customary magnificence, each dish a masterpiece of culinary art designed to please not merely the palate but all the senses. She eats without hurry, savoring flavors that represent the culmination of human achievement in the transformation of raw materials into aesthetic experience. The meal costs more than most families see in a lifetime, but such calculations exist outside her framework of understanding. She consumes luxury with the unconscious ease of someone who has never known scarcity, never faced want, never had to choose between competing needs. The day's schedule includes a journey to the family's manufacturing interests in the mid-level districts, a tour designed to provide her with a general understanding of the commercial enterprises that fund her lifestyle. It is intended as education in responsibility, preparation for the duties she will inherit, training in the proper oversight of business operations. The visit has been carefully planned to show her the clean, efficient, well-managed aspects of their industrial empire while shielding her from anything that might disturb her understanding of their enterprise as benevolent and necessary. Lady Cassera approaches the expedition with the mild interest of someone fulfilling an educational obligation. She understands the importance of understanding the family business, recognizes her need to prepare for future responsibilities, accepts the necessity of gaining practical experience in management and oversight. Yet her understanding of these necessities exists within the comfortable abstractions of her education, theoretical knowledge that has never been tested against practical reality, academic preparation that has never confronted the human cost of the systems she is learning to control. The air cab that carries her toward the mid-levels is a masterpiece of engineering and luxury. Its hull polished to perfection, its interior appointed with materials worth more than entire city districts. She travels in comfort that shields her from the outside world as effectively as any fortress, her journey insulated from the reality of the spaces she passes through. The vehicle's systems filter the air, regulate the temperature, control the lighting, and modulate the sound to maintain perfect conditions for her comfort. Even in transit, she remains isolated from the world that surrounds her. As the air cab descends through the levels of the hive, the view from her windows begins to change. The golden light of the upper reaches gives way to the filtered illumination of the mid-levels where artificial lighting supplements the weakening natural light. The architecture becomes more utilitarian, less concerned with beauty than with function. The population density increases. The spacing between buildings decreases. The signs of wealth and privilege become less obvious. Yet even these changes remain abstract to her. Scenery observed through armored transparisteel that maintains her separation from the reality outside. The manufacturing district represents the compromise between the necessity of production and the demands of noble sensibility. Here the family's industrial operations are housed in facilities designed to minimize obvious ugliness while maximizing efficiency and profit. The buildings are clean by Hive standards. The walkways maintained to reasonable levels of safety. the air filtration systems adequate to prevent immediate health hazards to visiting nobility. It is industry made palatable for noble consumption, production rendered acceptable for aristocratic oversight. Lady Cassera disembarks from her air cab with the confidence of someone entering familiar territory. The facility managers greet her with the deference appropriate to her station, their preparations obvious in every detail of the reception. They have spent weeks preparing for her visit, cleaning equipment that is normally left to accumulate grime, briefing workers on proper behavior in the presence of nobility, arranging tours that will show her exactly what they wish her to see while concealing anything that might disturb her understanding of their operations. The tour begins in the administrative sections, clean and comfortable spaces where the business of management takes place in environments not too different from her own home. Here she meets with supervisors and accountants, engineers and planners, the educated professionals who translate noble directives into operational reality. They speak her language, share her cultural references, understand her concerns and priorities. Their reports are comprehensive but carefully edited. Their explanations detailed but diplomatically phrased. Their presentations designed to inform without alarming. The production figures they show her are impressive. Revenues that demonstrate the success of family policies and the competence of management oversight. The profit margins reveal the efficiency of their operations, the return on investment that justifies continued confidence in their methods. The growth projections suggest expanding opportunities, new markets to exploit, additional populations to incorporate into their commercial empire. Everything they show her confirms the righteousness of their enterprise, the necessity of their methods, the inevitability of their success. Lady Cassera reviews these materials with growing satisfaction, her confidence in the family business reinforced by evidence of its prosperity and efficiency. She asks intelligent questions that reveal her understanding of business principles, offers observations that demonstrate her grasp of strategic thinking, provides suggestions that show her readiness to assume greater responsibility. The managers respond with approval and respect, recognizing in her the qualities that will make her an effective leader, someone capable of maintaining and expanding the empire she will inherit. The next phase of the tour takes her into the production areas themselves, carefully selected sections of the manufacturing complex where the actual work of creation takes place. These spaces have been prepared for her visit, cleaned beyond their normal standards, organized to present the most favorable possible impression of working conditions and operational efficiency. The workers she sees have been specially chosen for their appearance and demeanor, their ability to present the image of satisfied, productive employees rather than the reality of desperate, exploited human resources. She observes the production processes with the analytical interest of someone learning to understand the technical aspects of wealth creation. The machinery is impressive, the coordination complex, the efficiency obvious. Workers move with practiced skill, their motions coordinated by years of experience, their output measured in quantities that translate directly to family profit. She sees the transformation of raw materials into finished goods, the application of human labor to the creation of products that will generate the wealth that sustains her lifestyle. It all appears clean, efficient, and morally neutral. The workers she encounters have been carefully coached in the appropriate responses to noble inquiry. They express gratitude for their employment, satisfaction with their working conditions, loyalty to the family that provides them with purpose and sustenance. Their words have been rehearsed, their demeanor practiced, their performance designed to reinforce her understanding of the relationship between nobility and workers as mutually beneficial, naturally ordered, and morally justified. She sees what she has been prepared to see, hears what she has been trained to expect, understands what she has been educated to comprehend. Lady Cassera engages with these workers with the benevolent interest of someone fulfilling their obligation to show concern for those under their authority. She asks about their welfare, their satisfaction, their appreciation for the opportunities provided by family enterprise. Their responses confirm her understanding of herself as a benevolent ruler, someone whose wealth serves the greater good by providing employment and structure to those who would otherwise lack purpose and direction. The interaction leaves her feeling satisfied with her role, confident in her righteousness, secure in her understanding of the natural order. As the tour progresses through additional sections of the facility, her exposure to the reality of production remains carefully controlled and edited. She sees the aspects of manufacturing that can be presented as noble and necessary, the elements of industrial process that support her understanding of family enterprise as beneficial and righteous. The managers explain each process in terms that emphasize efficiency and necessity, productivity and profit, success and growth. Their language transforms exploitation into opportunity, suffering into service, desperation into dedication. The technical aspects of production fascinate her, the complexity and coordination required to transform raw materials into finished products. She begins to understand the scale of the operations that fund her lifestyle, the intricate systems that generate the wealth she has always taken for granted. Her questions become more sophisticated as her understanding grows. Her interest more genuine as she recognizes the impressive achievement that these facilities represent. She starts to feel a sense of pride in the family enterprise, satisfaction in the efficiency and success of the operations she will one day inherit. Yet even as her knowledge expands, even as her understanding deepens, she remains completely insulated from the human cost of the efficiency she admires, the suffering that underlies the success she celebrates, the desperation that drives the productivity she praises. The tour has been designed to educate her about business operations while protecting her from moral complications, to increase her competence while preserving her innocence, to prepare her for leadership while maintaining her ignorance of what that leadership demands. The final section of the tour takes her through quality control and shipping operations where the finished products of family enterprise are prepared for distribution to markets across the sector. Here she sees the culmination of the production process. Goods ready to be transformed into the wealth that sustains her existence. The efficiency is impressive. The organization sophisticated. The scale massive. Products flow through systems designed to maximize speed while ensuring quality. Their movement coordinated by logistical planning that spans multiple star systems. The managers explain the complexity of distribution networks that carry family products to markets across the galaxy. Trading relationships that span centuries, commercial agreements that shape the destiny of entire worlds. She begins to understand the true scope of family influence, the extent to which their decisions affect populations she will never see, the degree to which their wealth depends on systems that touch billions of lives. Yet this understanding remains abstract, theoretical, divorced from the human consequences of the power she is learning to wield. As the tour concludes, as she prepares to return to the comfort and familiarity of the upper spires, Lady Cassera feels a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. She has fulfilled her educational obligation, expanded her understanding of family business, demonstrated her readiness to assume greater responsibility. The visit has been successful, informative, and appropriate to her station. She returns to her air cab with confidence in the righteousness of family enterprise, pride in the efficiency of their operations, and satisfaction in her own growing competence as a future leader. The air cab rises through the levels of the Hive, carrying her back toward the golden light and purified air of the noble districts. The journey takes her through the same transitional zones she observed during her descent. But now she sees them with the confidence of someone who understands their place in the greater system, someone who recognizes their necessity and accepts their inevitability. The changes in architecture, population density, and general condition no longer seem like mere scenery, but like evidence of the natural order, the proper arrangement of society according to divine will and practical necessity. But as the air cab climbs toward the safety of the upper reaches, as Lady Cassera settles back into her cushioned seat with the satisfaction of educational duty fulfilled, the perfect machinery of her insulation encounters an imperfection so small, so seemingly insignificant that it passes almost unnoticed. A minor system failure in the air cab's navigation array. A glitch so brief that it barely registers on the monitoring systems. A momentary disruption in the perfect coordination of technology that maintains her separation from reality. The failure lasts less than 30 seconds. The backup systems engage immediately. The course correction is minimal. The delay barely noticeable. Under normal circumstances, such a minor malfunction would be logged for routine maintenance and forgotten. Another small imperfection in the vast machinery that sustains noble existence. The air cab continues its ascent, its passenger unaware that anything has gone wrong, its systems functioning within acceptable parameters despite the momentary disruption. Yet in those 30 seconds, in that brief moment of imperfection, the carefully maintained boundaries of Lady Cassara's world shift by the smallest possible margin. The navigation failure causes the air cab to deviate from its planned route by mere kilometers, a distance so insignificant that it barely qualifies as an error. The backup systems correct the deviation almost immediately, returning the vehicle to its proper trajectory with mechanical precision. The delay in arrival will be measured in minutes, the inconvenience minimal, the impact on her schedule negligible. But those kilometers of deviation carry the air cab over a section of the hive that was never meant to be seen by noble eyes, areas that exist outside the carefully planned routes that shield aristocracy from uncomfortable realities. Through the filtered transparisteel of her window, Lady Cassara glimpses spaces that do not appear on any tour, populations that were never meant to encounter her gaze, conditions that exist beyond the boundaries of acceptable noble knowledge. The view lasts only moments before the navigation systems restore the proper course. But in those moments, she sees things that her education never prepared her to witness, realities that her comfortable assumptions cannot easily absorb. Have blocks so crowded that human beings live stacked like cargo, their windows dark with the grime of centuries, their structures sagging under the weight of desperate overpopulation. Manufacturing facilities where the air itself seems to writhe with toxic particulates, where the machinery operates without the safety measures she observed during her carefully orchestrated tour. She sees workers moving through conditions that would kill her in minutes, their bodies adapted by generations of exposure to environments that destroy human health as surely as weapons destroy human life. Children who should be receiving education instead tend to machines that tower over them like predatory beasts, their small fingers valuable for reaching spaces where adult hands cannot go. Women bent double under loads that exceed their physical capacity, their backs permanently curved by labors that transform their bodies into tools for the creation of wealth they will never touch. The air cab passes over a section where a magrail tunnel has partially collapsed, the debris creating a canyon of twisted metal and broken stone. Emergency crews work in the ruins with the desperate efficiency of those who know their own lives depend on their speed and skill. Bodies emerge from the wreckage at irregular intervals, some moving with the painful slowness of the injured, others carried with the stillness that speaks of damage beyond repair. The scale of the disaster becomes apparent as she sees the true extent of the collapse. A failure of infrastructure that has claimed hundreds of lives and disrupted the transportation network that connects the various levels of the hive. Lady Cassara stares at the scene with the fascination of someone witnessing something completely outside their experience, something that exists beyond the boundaries of their understanding. The disaster below represents a failure of systems she had never considered, a breakdown of infrastructure she had never noticed, consequences of decisions she had never been asked to contemplate. The workers struggling in the wreckage are people whose existence she had never acknowledged, whose suffering she had never been required to consider, whose deaths she had never been taught to count as significant. The navigation systems complete their correction, restoring the air cab to its proper trajectory and carrying her away from the scene of destruction. The view from her window returns to the familiar sights of the planned route, the carefully maintained spaces that present acceptable images of hive life to noble observation. The glimpse of reality fades behind her like a bad dream, replaced by the reassuring normalcy of controlled environments and managed perceptions. Yet the images remain in her mind with unexpected persistence, refusing to fade as quickly as she would prefer, lingering with uncomfortable clarity. The air cab continues its ascent toward the safety and comfort of the upper reaches. But Lady Cassara finds herself unable to dismiss what she has seen as easily as she would wish. The brief glimpse of reality has created a small crack in the perfect shell of her ignorance, a tiny flaw in the seamless barrier that separates her from the truth of her existence. The crack is small, almost insignificant, but it allows questions to seep through that her education never taught her to ask, doubts that her upbringing never prepared her to manage. She finds herself wondering about the people she saw in the wreckage, whether they survived their injuries, whether their families will mourn their deaths, whether their sacrifice serves any purpose beyond the maintenance of systems that benefit those who live far above their suffering. These are not questions she has been trained to ask, concerns she has been educated to avoid, thoughts that threaten the comfortable certainties that define her worldview. Yet they persist with uncomfortable intensity, refusing to be dismissed or forgotten. The air cab reaches the transport nexus that serves the noble districts, a facility designed to facilitate smooth transitions between different modes of transportation while maintaining appropriate levels of security and comfort. Here, Lady Cassera should transfer to ground vehicles for the final journey to her family's spire. A routine transition that normally requires no thought or attention. The facility represents the pinnacle of efficient design, its systems coordinated to minimize inconvenience while maximizing safety and comfort for noble users. But as the air cab approaches the Nexus, as the routine transfer prepares to unfold with mechanical precision, the aftermath of the tunnel collapse begins to affect systems far beyond the immediate disaster site. The magrail network that connects the various levels of the Hive operates as an integrated whole, each component dependent on the proper functioning of every other element. The collapse has not merely destroyed a single tunnel, but disrupted the delicate balance that keeps the entire transportation system operational. Secondary failures begin to cascade through the network like dominoes falling in sequence, each breakdown creating additional stress on remaining components, each malfunction increasing the pressure on systems already operating beyond their design parameters. Power fluctuations affect the electrical grid that energizes the rail lines. Computer failures disrupt the scheduling algorithms that coordinate traffic flow. Mechanical breakdowns occur as equipment is pushed beyond safe operating limits in attempts to compensate for the lost capacity of the destroyed tunnel. The transport nexus, designed to handle normal traffic loads with comfortable efficiency, finds itself overwhelmed by the redirected flow of vehicles and passengers displaced by the rail network failure. Emergency protocols activate automatically, but these systems were never designed to handle disruptions of this magnitude and duration. The careful choreography of noble transportation begins to break down as the reality of infrastructure failure intrudes into spaces designed to be insulated from such concerns. Lady Cassara's air cab circles the Nexus in a holding pattern as traffic control attempts to manage the growing chaos below. Through her window, she can observe the increasing disorder as systems designed for smooth operation struggle to cope with unexpected demands. Ground vehicles queue in lines that stretch beyond the facility's capacity, their drivers frustrated by delays that were never supposed to occur. Emergency services race through the confusion with lights and sirens, their urgency contrasting sharply with the leisurely pace of normal noble transportation. The delay stretches from minutes into hours as the cascade of failures spreads through increasingly vital systems. What began as a minor navigation error has evolved into a significant disruption of the carefully maintained boundaries that separate noble existence from the harsh realities that surround it. Lady Cassera finds herself trapped in an air cab above a scene of growing disorder. Her isolation no longer complete, her separation from reality no longer absolute. As the delay continues, as the attempts to restore normal operations prove inadequate to the scale of the disruption, Lady Cassera faces a choice that should never have been necessary. She can remain in the air cab, waiting for systems to be repaired and normal service to be restored, accepting whatever delays this might require. Or she can descend into the Nexus itself, making her way through the chaos to alternative transportation, accepting a level of exposure to uncontrolled reality that violates every principle of noble security and comfort. The choice should be obvious. Safety protocols demand that she remain in the secure environment of the air cab until proper arrangements can be made for her transportation. Her training emphasizes the importance of maintaining appropriate separation from uncontrolled populations and unpredictable situations. Her entire education has prepared her to avoid exactly this kind of exposure to the messy, complicated, dangerous realities that exist beyond the boundaries of noble privilege. Yet as she watches the chaos below, as she sees the desperate efforts of workers struggling to restore order to systems that were never designed to handle such disruptions, she finds herself confronted by questions that her comfortable existence never required her to consider. The people working in the Nexus are not abstract resources but individuals whose competence and dedication determine whether the systems that serve her continue to function. Their efforts, their sacrifice, their willingness to work beyond safe limits in pursuit of solutions. These are the human realities that underlie the smooth operation of her privileged existence. The decision, when it comes, surprises her with its suddenness and clarity. Rather than waiting for systems to be restored, rather than remaining safely isolated from the complications below, Lady Cassera chooses to descend into the Nexus herself, to make her way through the chaos to whatever alternative transportation might be available. It is a decision that violates every principle of her upbringing, contradicts every lesson of her education, and threatens every assumption that defines her understanding of proper noble behavior. The air cab sets down in a section of the Nexus normally reserved for maintenance vehicles, a space that lacks the amenities and security measures of the noble passenger areas. As Lady Cassera emerges from the familiar comfort of her transportation, she steps for the first time into a space where her privilege provides no automatic protection, where her status offers no guarantee of special treatment, where she must navigate reality without the buffering presence of servants and systems designed to shield her from unpleasant complications. The nexus around her operates at a level of intensity and urgency that she has never experienced. Workers move with desperate efficiency as they struggle to manage crises that multiply faster than solutions can be implemented. The air carries sounds she has never heard, the sharp crackling of overloaded electrical systems, the grinding of machinery pushed beyond safe operating limits, the voices of people communicating essential information under extreme pressure. Everything moves at a pace that contrasts sharply with the leisurely rhythms of noble existence. She attempts to make her way through the facility toward the areas where alternative transportation might be arranged, but quickly discovers that her understanding of the Nexus layout, derived from carefully planned tours and educational briefings, provides little guidance for navigating the chaos of actual emergency operations. The spaces she knew from previous visits have been transformed by the crisis. Familiar landmarks obscured by emergency equipment, normal pathways blocked by redirected traffic flows. Workers rush past her with barely a glance, their attention focused on problems that require immediate solutions rather than the leisurely consideration of noble concerns. For the first time in her life, Lady Cassera finds herself in a space where her presence commands no special attention, where her needs are not automatically prioritized, where she must compete with other demands for the limited resources of human attention and assistance. The experience is both terrifying and oddly liberating, frightening in its unfamiliarity but strangely honest in its lack of pretense. As she struggles to navigate the unfamiliar environment, Lady Cassera encounters a maintenance supervisor whose responsibility includes managing the transportation alternatives for displaced passengers. He is a man in his 50s, his face marked by years of exposure to industrial environments, his hands bearing the permanent stains of someone who works with machinery rather than merely directing others to do so. His manner combines professional competence with the barely controlled frustration of someone dealing with problems that have no easy solutions. When she identifies herself and requests assistance with transportation arrangements, his response reveals the gap between noble expectations and operational reality. The systems designed to provide seamless service to aristocratic passengers have been overwhelmed by the scale of the current crisis, their capacity redirected to more urgent priorities. The alternative transportation available consists of maintenance vehicles and emergency transports, utilitarian conveyances that lack the comfort, security, and amenities that noble travel normally requires. The supervisor explains the situation with the patience of someone accustomed to dealing with difficult circumstances and demanding personalities. The Magrail collapse has disrupted not merely local transportation but the entire network that connects the various levels of the Hive. Repair efforts are underway, but the scope of the damage requires resources that were never stockpiled for emergencies of this magnitude. Restoration of normal service will require days rather than hours, weeks rather than days, perhaps months before full capacity is restored. Lady Cassera listens to this explanation with growing understanding of the true scale of the disaster she glimpsed from her air cab, the extent to which systems she had never considered could fail so completely. The comfortable assumptions of her existence included the belief that the infrastructure serving noble needs was essentially indestructible, maintained by competent professionals whose expertise guaranteed reliable operation. The reality of cascading failures, overwhelming demands, and inadequate resources challenges these assumptions in ways that her education never prepared her to handle. The alternative transportation offered consists of a maintenance pod designed for technical personnel traveling between facilities, a utilitarian vehicle that prioritizes function over comfort, reliability over luxury. The journey to the noble districts will require traveling through sections of the Hive that are normally avoided by aristocratic passengers, areas where the careful maintenance of noble routes gives way to the functional minimalism of working spaces. The supervisor warns her that the journey will expose her to conditions that violate every standard of noble transportation. The route passes through industrial districts where the air quality fails to meet aristocratic health requirements. The vehicle lacks the filtration systems that normally protect noble passengers from exposure to unacceptable environmental conditions. The journey will take her through populations and spaces that were never intended for aristocratic observation. Lady Cassera accepts these conditions with a mixture of resignation and curiosity that surprises her. The practical necessity of reaching her destination overrides the comfortable protocols of noble travel. But beyond mere necessity, she finds herself genuinely interested in seeing the spaces that her normal routes so carefully avoid. The brief glimpse of reality from her air cab has awakened a hunger for understanding that her privileged existence had never allowed her to recognize, a desire to see beyond the carefully maintained boundaries of noble perception. The maintenance pod is cramped, uncomfortable, and entirely lacking in the amenities that make noble travel pleasant. The seats are designed for function rather than comfort. The controls oriented toward efficiency rather than elegance. The entire vehicle built to standards that prioritize reliability and cost-effectiveness over passenger satisfaction. For Lady Cassera, accustomed to transportation that insulates her from the outside world while surrounding her with luxury, the pod represents a shocking reduction in comfort and status. Yet as the pod begins its journey through the depths of the Hive, as it carries her along routes that bypass the carefully maintained corridors of noble travel, she discovers that the reduction in comfort brings with it an increase in contact with reality. The pod's viewports, designed for technical observation rather than tourist appreciation, provide unfiltered views of spaces that her normal transportation never allowed her to see. The industrial districts through which they travel operate at levels of intensity and desperation that dwarf even the managed chaos of the transport nexus. Here, the production facilities that generate the wealth supporting noble existence reveal their true character when not prepared for aristocratic observation. The air shimmers with toxic particulates that would kill unprotected nobles in minutes, but which workers breathe daily as a condition of their employment. The machinery operates beyond safe parameters, driven by quotas that prioritize production over human safety, efficiency over worker welfare. Lady Cassera observes these conditions through the pod's viewports with growing horror and fascination. The workers she sees move with the exhausted determination of people pushed beyond their physical limits, their bodies bearing the permanent marks of industrial labor performed under conditions that destroy human health as surely as warfare destroys human life. Children work alongside adults in violations of every safety protocol she learned during her educational tour, their small size making them valuable for tasks that require access to spaces where adult bodies cannot fit. Women bent double under loads that exceed their physical capacity, their backs permanently curved by labors that transform their bodies into tools for the creation of wealth they will never touch. The supervisor operating the pod provides commentary that reveals the gap between official policies and operational reality. The safety regulations that exist on paper are routinely ignored when they conflict with production requirements. The working conditions that appear acceptable during noble inspections deteriorate rapidly when aristocratic attention is focused elsewhere. The humanity of the workers disappears beneath the pressure of quotas that treat human beings as expendable resources in systems designed to maximize profit regardless of human cost. As the pod continues through increasingly desperate districts, Lady Cassera begins to understand the true foundation upon which her comfortable existence rests. Every luxury she enjoys requires the suffering of people who will never experience anything approaching her level of comfort. Every convenience of noble life demands the sacrifice of human beings whose lives are measured in production quotas rather than personal fulfillment. Every moment of her privileged existence is purchased with the blood, sweat, and desperation of populations she was never allowed to see. The revelation comes not as a sudden shock but as a growing awareness that accumulates detail by detail, horror by horror, until the weight of understanding becomes impossible to bear. She has not been evil, but she has been ignorant. She has not been consciously cruel, but she has been unconsciously complicit. She has not chosen to cause suffering, but she has chosen to remain blind to the suffering that her existence requires. The pod reaches a maintenance station where they must stop for refueling and route planning, a facility that serves as a hub for the technical personnel who keep the Hive systems operational. Here, Lady Cassera encounters workers whose expertise maintains the infrastructure that supports noble existence, but whose own living conditions reveal the true priorities of the system they serve. They live in spaces that would be considered uninhabitable by noble standards, eat food that would be rejected by aristocratic pets, breathe air that would trigger immediate evacuation if detected in noble districts. Yet these are the people whose competence and dedication prevent the total collapse of the systems that sustain Hive civilization. Their knowledge of complex technical systems exceeds that of most nobles. Their problem-solving abilities surpass those of aristocratic education. Their commitment to their responsibilities puts noble privilege to shame. They work not from choice but from necessity, not from satisfaction but from desperation, not from loyalty but from the simple requirement of survival in a system that offers them no alternatives. Lady Cassera speaks with several of these workers during the refueling stop, her questions revealing her genuine curiosity about their lives and experiences. Their responses provide her with perspectives that her education never included, insights that her comfortable assumptions never allowed her to consider. They speak of families destroyed by industrial accidents, children who will never receive education because their labor is more valuable than their learning, communities that exist in conditions of perpetual emergency as systems designed for maximum efficiency operate constantly on the edge of catastrophic failure. The conversation reveals the human cost of the efficiency she admired during her educational tour, the suffering that underlies the success she was taught to celebrate, the desperation that drives the productivity she was trained to value. The workers speak without bitterness, their tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory, their manner accepting of realities that would horrify noble sensibilities. They have adapted to conditions that would destroy aristocratic morale, developed resilience that puts noble character to shame, found ways to maintain humanity in circumstances designed to reduce human beings to mere components in production systems. As the pod resumes its journey toward the noble districts, Lady Cassera finds herself struggling to integrate what she has learned with the assumptions that have defined her entire existence. The comfortable certainties of her upbringing cannot easily accommodate the realities she has witnessed. The moral simplicities of her education cannot address the complexities of the situations she has encountered. She faces a choice between maintaining her ignorance and accepting knowledge that will transform her understanding of everything she believed about herself and her world. The final section of the journey takes her through the transitional zones between the working districts and the noble spires, areas where the character of the Hive begins to change from utilitarian functionality to aesthetic consideration. Here the differences in maintenance standards, air quality, and general conditions become starkly apparent as the pod moves from spaces designed for production to spaces designed for consumption, from areas where human beings are expendable resources to areas where human comfort is the primary consideration. The contrast reveals the artificiality of the boundaries that separate noble existence from worker reality, the deliberate nature of the barriers that prevent aristocratic awareness of the costs of privilege. The improved conditions of the transitional zones exist not because resources are suddenly abundant, but because priorities suddenly shift from maximizing production to ensuring noble comfort. The same materials, the same labor, the same technical expertise that could improve conditions in the working districts are instead directed toward maintaining the perfect environments that shield nobility from awareness of the suffering that sustains their existence. Lady Cassera observes these transitions with new eyes, her recent exposure to reality providing her with the context necessary to understand what she is seeing. The comfort that surrounds her as the pod approaches the noble districts no longer seems natural or inevitable but artificial and maintained at tremendous cost. The luxury that defines aristocratic existence no longer appears as a deserved privilege but as a deliberate choice to prioritize noble comfort over human welfare. The pod finally reaches the noble districts as evening approaches, its journey complete despite the disruptions that made normal transportation impossible. The supervisor who guided her through the depths of the Hive prepares to return to his duties in the industrial districts, his responsibility for her welfare ending with her safe arrival in aristocratic territory. Yet before she disembarks, before she returns to the familiar comfort of noble existence, Lady Cassera finds herself reluctant to end their journey, reluctant to sever her connection to the reality she has discovered. She thanks him for his assistance and expertise, her words carrying genuine gratitude for someone whose competence made her safe passage possible. His response is polite but distant, his manner reflecting the professional detachment of someone accustomed to dealing with noble passengers without expecting lasting concern for his own circumstances or those of his fellow workers. The interaction ends with the routine courtesy that typically characterizes exchanges between aristocrats and those who serve them. Yet as Lady Cassera disembarks from the maintenance pod, as she prepares to return to the familiar luxury of her family's spire, she carries with her knowledge that will forever change her understanding of her existence. The comfortable ignorance of her upbringing has been shattered by direct exposure to the realities that her privilege depends upon. The moral simplicities of her education have been complicated by awareness of the human cost of the systems she was trained to inherit and perpetuate. She stands at the entrance to her family's estate as evening shadows begin to fall across the noble districts. Her day's journey complete, but her transformation only beginning. The golden light that filters down from the orbital mirrors illuminates the same beautiful architecture, the same carefully maintained gardens, the same perfect environment that has surrounded her since birth. Yet now she sees these familiar sights with new understanding, awareness of the suffering that purchased their beauty, knowledge of the exploitation that sustains their perfection. The servants who greet her return display their usual efficiency and deference, their manner unchanged by her absence or her experiences. They assist her with the rituals of arrival, helping her transition from the discomfort of emergency transportation back to the familiar luxury of noble existence. Their movements are choreographed by years of service, their responses automatic, their attention focused entirely on ensuring her comfort and meeting her needs. Yet Lady Cassera finds herself seeing these servants differently, recognizing in their practiced efficiency the same adaptation to difficult circumstances that she observed in the industrial workers, the same resilience in the face of conditions that require constant sacrifice of personal needs to serve the demands of others. The servants in her family's estate exist in conditions far superior to those she witnessed in the working districts, but they remain fundamentally powerless, their lives shaped entirely by the needs and desires of those they serve. She retires to her chambers to prepare for the evening meal, the familiar routine of aristocratic self-care proceeding as it always has despite the revolutionary changes in her understanding. The servants attend to her needs with mechanical precision, dressing her in garments appropriate for dinner, arranging her appearance to meet the standards expected of noble presentation. The process feels the same as it always has, yet her awareness of its cost has been fundamentally altered by her exposure to the realities that sustain it. As she prepares to join her family for dinner, Lady Cassera faces the challenge of maintaining normal aristocratic behavior while carrying knowledge that threatens every assumption that defines noble existence. She must participate in conversations that treat worker populations as abstract resources, discuss policies that prioritize profit over human welfare, and pretend enthusiasm for luxuries purchased with the suffering of people she can no longer ignore. The dining hall awaits her with its customary magnificence. The long table set with the finest materials in the galaxy, the assembled family and guests prepared for another evening of aristocratic entertainment. The food represents the culmination of exploitation she now understands. The conversation will cover topics whose human cost she can no longer dismiss. The entire event will celebrate a way of life that requires the perpetual misery of billions for the temporary pleasure of dozens. She takes her place at the high table with the automatic grace of someone performing a familiar role, her position reflecting her family's status, her presence expected and welcomed by those who share her bloodline and privilege. Yet she sits among them now as someone fundamentally changed, someone who has seen beyond the carefully maintained boundaries of noble perception, someone who can never again enjoy aristocratic luxury with the innocent ignorance that once made such pleasure possible. The evening meal proceeds with its ritual precision, each course arriving with ceremony that transforms consumption into performance, each dish representing not merely food but statement about wealth, refinement, and position. Lady Cassera participates in the familiar routines of noble dining, her behavior indistinguishable from previous evenings, her manner giving no indication of the revolutionary changes in her understanding. Yet every bite carries new meaning. Every conversation reveals new implications. Every moment of luxury demands new consideration of its cost. The conversation flows around her as it always has, familiar topics discussed with the casual confidence of people who have never doubted their right to make decisions that affect billions of lives. They speak of policies and profits, strategies and opportunities, plans that will increase their wealth while expanding the suffering that sustains it. Their voices carry the authority of absolute certainty. Their words the weight of unquestioned privilege. Their assumptions the strength of unchallenged tradition. Lady Cassera listens with new ears, understanding implications that her education never prepared her to recognize, hearing costs that her training never taught her to calculate. She knows what lies beneath their comfortable abstractions, what human realities underlie their theoretical discussions, what suffering supports their casual assumptions about the natural order of existence. And she knows that she must choose whether to speak or remain silent, whether to challenge or accommodate, whether to act on her new understanding or protect the ignorance of those around her. The choice will define not merely her own future but her character, not merely her comfort but her soul, not merely her privilege but her humanity. The distance between paradise and hell has been measured and crossed. The question now is whether she will build a bridge or maintain the chasm, whether she will extend her hand to those below or pull up the ladder that allowed her to see. The evening meal continues around her, its familiar rhythms unchanged by her transformation, its comfortable certainties untroubled by her newfound knowledge. But Lady Cassera sits among her family and peers as someone who has seen truth, who carries knowledge that will forever burden her with the weight of choice, who can never again enjoy aristocratic luxury without remembering exactly what it costs and who pays that price. The golden light of the orbital mirrors falls through the great windows of the dining hall, illuminating faces that remain beautiful in their ignorance, voices that remain confident in their assumptions, lives that remain comfortable in their isolation. And in the center of it all sits a young woman who has learned that the distance between paradise and hell is not geographical but moral, not measured in kilometers but in choices, not crossed by transportation but by conscience. She has seen what her existence demands, understood what her privilege requires, recognized what her comfort costs. Now she must decide what to do with that knowledge. The conversation continues. The wine flows, the laughter echoes through halls built on suffering. And Lady Cassera Vera, heir to House Vera, sits in silence, knowing that tomorrow and every day after, she will wake to a paradise built on hell, and she will have to choose, again and again, whether to maintain that distance or try to close it. The question is no longer whether she knows the truth. The question is whether knowing will be enough to change anything at all. In the grim darkness of the far future, ignorance is not merely bliss, it is the foundation of empire. And awakening, no matter how profound, is only the first step on an impossibly long journey toward justice in a galaxy that has long since forgotten what that word means.